I am also a missing persons advocate with the Missing in Michigan organization. I wanted to cover Laurie's case, and it turned out that a friend of mine who's a criminal investigator in the Chicago area, her mother and her father grew up with Laurie Dann and Laurie's husband, which gave me some unique information about her case and her story. And I'm presenting today with Gary.
Hello, hi everybody doing? My name is Gary Howard. I am a truck driver. I'm a host of Truck Stop Murder and True Crime Podcast. Also Missing Miles is what I started doing. And it's cases around where I park and everything. And as for Laurie Dann, I actually grew up in Chicago, and I do remember when all this was going down with the news. And ever since then, this is one of the cases that's just been stuck in my mind. Like, why? What happened? And then as time progressed, the case got more deeper and deeper. And then my wife sent me a case. I'd never seen anything about Laurie Dann. No videos, nobody covered it until I got Nina's case. I'm like, she really understands her. Everybody else afterwards says that she's a demon burning in hell, and rich poor little girl got everything. But it turns out it's not that. It's all mental illness and everything. That could have been stopped. But, ready?
Yes.
So, my eyeballs on. Today we're talking about a true crime case out of Chicago, the short life and violent death of Laurie Dann. She's best known for the events that occurred on the last day of her life when she embarked on a murderous spree through the well-heeled northern suburbs of Chicago. Before we get to the story, we need to caution you about the graphic descriptions of the sexual assault and, of course, the murder of a child. Which you want to go over Nicholas Corman right now? Nicholas Corman. He was a young boy at a school. He was ready. He did a bike test that day. He was so excited by it. He was a really friendly, outgoing kid. That day, he was taking a bike test. So he did a riding test and getting ready for the written test. And let me get these notes right here. Well, we'll get to that. But yeah, he is a lot of people. I'm sorry.
We need to remember Nicholas.
Right.
He's the victim.
Remember him as the victim. Because a lot of people think that Laurie Dann is the victim, but well, she was born in Chicago, city Chicago. Laurie grew up in Highland Park, Glencoe, Illinois. If you aren't familiar with Highland Park and Glencoe, they are located in North Chicago, right on Lake Michigan. These are among the wealthiest communities in Illinois and the Midwestern part of the United States. As a child, Laurie attended Westridge Elementary School and later Red Oak Middle School, where she had a reputation of being very quiet and exceptionally good at spelling. Peers would recall greeting her with a hello as she passed the hallway, where Laurie would just look at with no response, kind of like a dead look. You know, peers would no respond greeting, and personally, relationships was never her strong suit. She struggled to contact with people and had few friends. Laurie was an average-looking girl and average intelligence. While her parents, Norman and Edith, couldn't make her daughter smarter or more social adept, they could improve her appearance by first, they saw orthotist who straightened her smile, and then the Wassmers sent teenage Laurie to a plastic surgeon. Instead of helping her, let's just cover up the issue. The surgery transformed Laurie from average to attractive, and while her daughter might not be the smartest or the most outgoing, she was now good looking, a petite 5'3", and straight teeth, long brown hair, and dark eyes. As a teenager, she attended Highland Park High School for her freshman and sophomore years. In the summer between her sophomore and junior year, her parents purchased a luxurious 5-bedroom home in Glencoe, and Laurie transferred to a new high school where nobody knew her. It is my understanding that the plastic surgery, which transformed her features into a more attractive version, occurred in the summer where she was between schools. Laurie struggled to make girlfriends, but she never lacked a date on Friday night. While in high school, Laurie and her boyfriends but didn't do well with other girls at her age. Sorry. There were few female peers in her social circle. Laurie Wassman flat out said to more than one person, "I don't have any friends and I don't know what to do." Yet, when somebody greeted her passing, she would look at them blankly and not respond. Despite mediocre grades upon graduation from New Trier High School in 1975, Laurie Wassman headed off to college, attended Drake University in Iowa. New Trier in high school recorded schools And it is not surprising that even a mediocre student could head off to college after graduation, which I will pause there for a second. You think her parents kind of rushed her off to college prematurely at that point? I've always wondered that.
Being a high school student in the 80s, like, your parents wanted you to go to college. It was just the accepted next step.
Right.
So I think that it was just, this is, like, they didn't look at Laurie as an individual. They looked at her as someone who needed to go to college because that's what everybody does at your age in your socioeconomic group.
Right. I was thinking just later on, events
Yeah.
makes me wonder about that. But yeah. Well, a student at Drake, one of the girls from New Tier, spotted her on campus. She was happy to see a familiar face, even if it was Laurie Wasserman, who she did not know very well. They lived in the same building and had a class together. This student greeted Laurie and suggested they walk to class together. Laurie's response was odd. She initially agreed that they would walk together and tells her that Laurie doesn't have any friends and doesn't know what to do. The two young girls continued in the same class and saw each other a couple of times a week and during the duration of the term, yet Laurie will have no memory of meeting the young woman and when they crossed paths a few years later. After completing her freshman year at Drake, she transfers to Arizona State University. At Arizona State, she plays a sorority, Alpha Delta Pi, and while in Arizona, Laurie embarked on the first serious romantic relationship of her life. When Laurie was in junior in college, she began seeing a fellow student. He was an undergrad in pre-med program. Laurie thought their relationship was serious, and perhaps this guy was the one. Despite feelings for him and her hopes for something long-term between them, Laurie's behavior was becoming increasingly bizarre and unsettling. This is what this will start. She was suspicious and controlling through her actions. She just demonstrated a lack of trust in her boyfriend. Put off by her unpredictability and anger, he ended the relationship and was Laurie struggling following her to break up. Remember, she's alone in Arizona by herself. And she's not one to have set a close female friend who got her through the abrupt ending in her first serious relationship. I'm sorry about talking. A friend of the couple would later say that he didn't see anything disturbing in the behavior of Laurie. She was possessive and clingy, but according to this college acquaintance quoted in June 5th, 1988, Chicago Tribune, Laurie was never a budding psychopath or nothing in Arizona. She never saw it. In the summer of 1980, and much of her disappointment, Laurie's first serious relationship is over. Rather than sticking things out in Arizona and earning those last credits needed for her degree, Laurie's parents helped pack her things, and she returns home to Glencoe, Illinois, where Laurie would enroll in Northeast University as soon as she gets there. She intended to complete her studies there.
So the change of scenery in schools was not enough to rally Laurie. She was not in a good place mentally, and she dropped out of Northwestern without completing the requirements needed for her to earn a degree. Now this is a clear sign that Laurie needs help. She's not functioning like she should be able to, but no one stepped in to help her. Not the university, not her brother, not her parents. So it's 1981, and she is undecided about the future, and she has this emerging mental illness, and I do think Laurie knew that. But she took a summer job as a waitress at the Green Acres Country Club in Northbrook, Illinois, and that's where she meets Russell Dann. Russell was the son of a prominent Highland Park family. Laurie was a petite brunette in a figure-hugging waitress uniform. He found her hard to resist and asked for her number. Russell, known as Rusty, was a catch. He was dark-haired, good-looking. He came from money, probably more money than Laurie's family had. The Dann name was on a prominent building in the community. Now, what I heard from the people that knew Laurie back in the day was that Rusty knew that Laurie was a little bit off, she was a little quirky, but he liked it. He thought it was cute. After months of dating, he proposed to her in Boca Raton, Florida, while they were vacationing at her parents' second home. Laurie Wasserman and Rusty Dann were married in September of 1982. At the request of Laurie's family, the wedding was very small. Laurie Rusty came from a big family, lots of brothers and sisters, whereas Laurie did not have a circle of girlfriends, and she just had the one brother. With financial help and support from their parents, the new couple purchased a spacious home in a good neighborhood, a place to start their lives together and hopefully someday start a family. So if you look at Laurie at this point, it's like she's got it all. She's got this good-looking husband, she's got a beautiful house, they have plenty of money, she can decorate the house however she wants, and that's just fine. But her mental health issues are getting worse. Rusty worked long days at the agency, and he wanted to come home and have dinner with his pretty wife every night, but Laurie could not complete basic household tasks like cooking, laundry. He would come home after work and find Laurie on the sofa staring at the television, and there would be wet clothing, like she'd run the washing machine, and she would stuff the clothing in dresser drawers. When he would open the microwave to warm up a meal, her makeup would be sitting in the microwave. So there's definitely something going wrong with her mentally. Then one winter day, there was an event for the Dann family business, and it was held at the Drake Hotel in Chicago. So imagine a fancy end-of-year holiday party. Men are in suits and women are in cocktail dresses. And while at this party, Laurie ran into a woman that recognized her from high school and college. This is the woman that Gary talked about earlier, that they would walk to class together. And when she was introduced to Laurie, she said, "Oh, hey, it's nice to see you again." And Laurie just looked at her like she didn't know who she was. There was no flicker of recognition in Laurie's face. It was like they had never met before, even though they'd attended both high school and college together. So Laurie has this inability to relate to others in social situations, and then is exhibiting bizarre behavior at home. She appears to be depressed and distracted. She is unable to complete basic tasks like laundry and preparing simple meals. She is also showing signs of obsessive compulsive disorder. Now, people use the term OCD to refer to quirks about themselves. I am guilty of this and I should not do it, but actual OCD is debilitating. It can interfere with a person's ability to function day to day. Symptoms of OCD include intrusive or persistent thoughts that cannot be ignored. In some people with OCD, the thoughts can lead to unwanted routines and behaviors that are rigid. Trying to ignore the thoughts or avoid the behavior causes them great distress. Rusty would later report that Laurie would tap her foot when the car was stopped at a traffic light, and she washed her hands repetitively. Rusty had parties and dinners and work functions to attend and wanted his wife with him, but as the weeks and months went by, Laurie would not leave the house, not even with Rusty. He loved her, but he could not continue in this relationship. He talked to her about her behavior, but Laurie said she didn't know what to do to fix it or how to get better. So he provided for the couple, and Laurie spent her days sitting in front of the television. In 1985, after 3 years of marriage, Rusty moved out of their home and moved into an apartment. He suggested to Laurie that she move back to her parents, and he put their house on the market. And to give you an idea of how they were living as this young couple in their 20s, the house that they lived in is now worth about $600,000. And that was their first home as a young married couple. So Laurie moves back home, and within days of her leaving, Rusty starts getting repetitive hang-up phone calls, sometimes dozens of phone calls in a day. And he wasn't the only one getting the calls. His parents and siblings also were getting hang-up calls. In April of 1986, Laurie is back home with her parents. Russ is puzzled when he learns that Laurie filed a police report claiming that he broke into her parents' home and vandalized it. And the police questioned him, and he's like, "I had nothing to, this didn't happen." But days after filing the report, Laurie went out and bought a .357 Magnum handgun. When police learn that she has made this purchase, they go to her house and talk to her father, Norman. And in speaking with him, the police strongly suggest that she not have access to a weapon. They sit down and have a serious conversation with him. But Wasserman refused to confiscate the gun, but he told the police that he would make sure it was locked up in a safe. Here is another opportunity to help Laurie that is missed. In September of 1986, an unknown person broke into Russell Dann's apartment in the middle of the night. and they crept into the bedroom where he was sleeping and they stabbed him in the chest with an ice pick. Russ survived the attack. He used the phone to call an ambulance, and paramedics transported him to the hospital for treatment. He was very lucky. The ice pick missed his heart by inches. He told them how unbalanced his soon-to-be ex-wife was and how he moved into the apartment as the divorce was going through. Police did talk to Laurie about what happened, and she denied all involvement. Following the stabbing, a store clerk came forward to say that she sold Laurie an ice pick in the days before the attack. Despite the clerk reporting the sale, no witnesses placed Laurie at the scene, so police decided to issue polygraphs. And you know how we feel about polygraphs, but it was a big tool to have in the 80s, so they used it. Rusty Dan failed his polygraph. Laurie Dan passed her polygraph.
Because he was more angry. I think that at the time his anger thing really got his heartbeat going up. So he was going to fail it to begin with, where she was more calm about it. So she was able to pass that.
I agree.
And as we know, they do not stand up in court at all.
Yeah.
And from that point on, they really thought that he did it to himself, that it was a self-inflicted stab wound.
The police did not take him seriously, and part of the reason they did not take Rusty's concerns about his safety seriously is that the doctors who examined him after the attack speculated that Rusty could have stabbed himself. So they did not charge Laurie in the incident. This is another missed opportunity to stop Laurie Dan.
Okay. So,
Oh, real quick, this is Laurie's weapons permit.
while the letters started harmless, eventually Laurie when Rusty recovered from the ice pick, Laurie set the sights on her college boyfriend that she was with in Arizona. Well, she started writing him letters. At first, while the letters were harmless, eventually Laurie told him she was pregnant with his child, which was ridiculous because Laurie hasn't seen him it's been 5 years since she's seen him. And also at one point said that she had been raped by him. But she contacted the hospital where he was employed. She told him that she had been treated at the emergency room and he sexually assaulted her during the exam. This accusation didn't fly for lots of reasons. There was no record of her even being there. And this in the hospital that she was called was from, while she was in the suburbs of Chicago, this was in Arizona where she was called, so it couldn't have been her. Upset by these bizarre accusations and continued persistent unwanted contact from Laurie, the doctor first contacted the police, and when that didn't help, he got a lawyer involved. Laurie's parents are going to contacted by law enforcement and told that the harassment needs to stop, which puts a temporary end to the bizarre behavior of the doctor and the family, which of course her parents kind of overlooked it and didn't worry too much about it. In addition to placing harassing calls to her college boyfriend, Laurie allegedly responds for dozens, if not hundreds of calls to family members, her husband, family members, prank calls, not just Rusty, but his sister, and parents were recipients of numerous phone calls. She would just call and hang up, and then just call, hang up, call, hang up. At one point, Laurie was arrested for harassment, but charges were dropped due to lack of evidence. Laurie seemed, fixed on Rusty. April of 1987, Laurie told the police that her soon-to-be former husband had, quote, raped her at knife point. So she was given a physical exam which demonstrated that she could have been assaulted in a way, but again, Laurie's given a lie detector test, and she passed it, and just like she did after her soon-to-be husband was stabbed with the ice pick, as she mentioned. And of course, she passed that as well. In May 1987, after 4 years of marriage, the divorce of Laurie and Rusty is finalized. Laurie receives a settlement of $125,000 in the divorce. That's almost $300,000 in today's money. Laurie left the marriage, but she kept her name Laurie Dan. So she just was comfortable with that. Matter of fact, at the time when she was living with them, he actually gave her a gift. Was it like a sweater? No, I'm sorry?
I don't know this one.
Okay. She was wearing during the wedding, during the marriage. One of the things that she gave, Russell gave Laurie Dan was a pair of sweatpants. And she wore that constantly. She was afraid so much in her mind that if she took the sweatpants off, Rusty would leave her. So that was one of the things. She had one of them or issues like that where she'd get into ordeal things and she would stay there. That's
She would fixate.
Right. Every time, like when he left for work, she had a tap on him, the things. She's like just different things that she did. But yeah, she wore that pair of sweatpants for her. She would never take them off because that was how, she was afraid she was going to leave him, how, insecure of herself she was, shall I say. Oh, as parting gift, Russell Dann on May, she reported to police that Russell Dann left an incinerate device, kind of like a cocktail device on the counter, which you have to throw that. In the home she shared with her parents. The wording is interesting. An incinerate device is something meant to start a fire, something Laurie will soon be doing. We'll move into that. In 1987, fresh off her divorce, almost 30-year-old Laurie Dann needed something to do with her days, so she decided to babysitting. She posted flyers in Glencoe Library and a corner grocery store and soon received calls for work. Laurie watched several children at several homes in the area, and not surprisingly, her clients reported several bizarre incidents, including leather sofas being sliced open, rugs being cut apart, and garage doors openers going missing. Laurie, of course, denied any knowledge of development, and her parents always came in, stepped in, opened their wallet, and said, "Here you go." Another case where she could have been helped, which was avoided. The babysitting is fine, but Laurie wanted to finish her degree and enrolled at Northwestern. Her father secured a private dorm room for her on campus. Keep in mind that she's turned 30 at the time, and there's a bunch of young kids, college-age students, in October returning to the dorm life where she was surrounded by students who were, 17, 22. I'm getting ahead of myself. Moving in the dorm seems like an odd choice, but I don't think she ever went to school after that. She just got the dorm, and where she wouldn't go to no classes, she was like one of where she could monitor a student.
Yeah.
She wasn't a full-time student, but she could monitor different classes.
Yeah, she was auditing different classes and living on campus, but she's 30 years old and living with a bunch of teenagers, basically.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So her return to school was a complete disaster. Laurie's behavior was bizarre and disturbing. She would get raw meat and stick it into couch cushions, in common areas. She would collect garbage and fill students' mailboxes with it. Her hygiene slipped, and she bathed infrequently. And her dorm room was filthy. The walls and furniture stained, and puddles of urine made the floor a stinking treacherous mess. I just don't think she really know how to take care of herself. The university sometimes she'll be down in the day room where she puts that meat, and she'll just be watching TV, and she'll just be clicking through the channels real fast and not knowing when, or if somebody else was watching TV, she'll come and she'll be like, "This is my TV now," and start clicking through the channels, just take over. The university called the Wassermans to say that this is not working out. Please come get your daughter. Her dorm room is so disgusting that is declared a health hazard. While Laurie trashed her room and filled it with waste and garbage, it didn't get in the way of her sleeping habits. She would simply spend the night in her car. So the situation in Northwestern is both horrifying and unbelievably sad. It's clear that Laurie is disturbed, but rather than to get the psychiatric help that she needs, her father again gets the checkbook out, make the problem go away, paying for damages and whisking Laurie back to the home. Which that's what's a constant rotation. That's why I bring to college and come home, back to that college, bring home, where she'll go to another college. After being, several weeks later, in the summer of 1987, Norman Wasserman rented an apartment for his daughter in Evanston near the campus of Northwestern. While Laurie didn't register for classes, she would spend time riding the elevators in the building for hours, just up and down. Laurie also wore gloves on her hands to avoid touching anything metal with her OCD. Between riding the elevators and wearing gloves, it appears the obsession-compulsive disorder was poorly managed. So there's no medication and nothing like that. She was known as the crazy elevator woman at that point. While living in an off-campus apartment, Laurie was seen by psychiatrists, but in November of 1987, not long after her 30th birthday, her parents moved her to Madison, Wisconsin. While in Wisconsin, she started several new treatment techniques She saw a new psychiatrist, worked a behavior therapist, and began taking new medications in her attempt to relieve the symptoms. While living in Madison, Laurie purchased a second handgun. She selected a .32 caliber, Smith & Wesson this time. The new medications aren't helping. Laurie was still riding elevators 4 hours at a time, and was thought that her developing an eating disorder. And but I don't think she was taking her medicine. I think she's the type of person you have to be reminded of the time to take her medicine. So
she needed more support than she was getting. She should have been living at home, having someone help her with her medication and her grooming, and she just wasn't getting that support.
No, not at all. And because she went down to 100 pounds. So in December 1987, Laurie decided to buy herself a gift. Surprise, it's another gun. She now owns 3 weapons, but remember, her father promised the .357 Magnum was locked up where she couldn't access it, just like the police requested. Spoiler alert, Norman Wiseman was not honest with them. His response was, well, Laurie needs to protect herself. She has a crazy ex-husband that's trying, why can't Laurie protect herself? So he just told the police what they wanted to hear, and said, yeah, I'll lock up the weapons and just to get them out of there. In addition to gun ownership and riding elevators, Laurie's hobbies include making dozens, if not hundreds, of phone calls each day. Back to where I was at with the phone calls. According to a piece in Chicago Tribune, at the end of 1987, several friends and family members of Russell Dann asked to meet with police to discuss ongoing harassment calls from Laurie, which is still going on. The different phases, many faces of Laurie Dann. Laurie's parents were asked to turn over the phone bills to further investigation, but they refused to comply, of course, and request, making it difficult to prosecute Laurie's harassment.
So remember that new course of outpatient treatment that Laurie was receiving in Wisconsin? In March of '88, Laurie stopped attending appointments with her psychiatrist and her therapist. Her psychiatrist and her father tried to persuade her to check herself into the hospital for inpatient treatment, but Laurie refused. Now, I'm going to have an aside here. I'm going to go off script. In the early 90s, I was an admissions coordinator for an inpatient psychiatric program. And I would assist families in getting their loved one involuntarily committed to a psychiatric hospital. Laurie absolutely was a danger to herself. She was not caring for herself properly. They could have involuntarily committed her to a psychiatric hospital and gotten her some intensive treatment, and they chose not to. So there is part of me that feels very sorry for Laurie, because she must have been miserable. I cannot imagine living that way.
And plus it makes it harder when her only role models is not seeing the issue. No. They're paying as long as they get the money to bail her out, get her out of her issues. If they don't see an issue, she don't see an issue, what's the use of getting help?
Right. So weeks after she stopped going to her appointments, a janitor in the building where she lived entered the maintenance room, where he found Laurie laying on the floor under a trash bag. Laurie is naked and curled in a fetal position. Her parents are contacted and Laurie goes back home. The next day, the FBI arrives in Madison, Wisconsin to talk with her about the death threats and persistent phone calls, but Laurie is gone. So this is another missed opportunity. The FBI was involved in this case because Laurie was making threats to friends and family of both her former husband and her college boyfriend. The threats and harassing phone calls were over state lines. The FBI advised law enforcement in Madison that something was wrong with Laurie Dann, and they suspected that she had a gun. Now, Laurie owned 3 guns and an ice pick, and she was not taken into custody. So we have another missed opportunity. While living with her parents, Laurie becomes domestic. While she never cooked for Rusty, she's now baking and preparing things. Her kitchen efforts include several trays of Rice Krispie treats that she delivered to fraternity houses in Evanston, Illinois. These were special treats. When Laurie was living in Madison, Wisconsin, she'd done a fair amount of shoplifting. She stole clothing and wigs and hit up the hardware store, where she stole packages of arsenic. All items she brought with her back to Glencoe, and now she's putting them to use. These poison snacks were dangerous, and fortunately they were so nasty, nobody wanted to eat them. The good news is that nobody was injured in her attempts to poison them.
Plus, I think the strength of the arsenic was really low.
Yeah.
So it wasn't full strength. It was like 100%. So you would get sick, but you wouldn't. I don't think there was any chance of death happening. You have to eat a lot of it.
So Laurie is living at home and she is spiraling. She is not in a good place mentally or emotionally. She visits a family on Forest Glen Drive that she'd worked for previously, and she asks if they need her services. And the family's like, you know what, sorry, we're moving. We're about to move out of state, so we don't need a sitter. And she says, well, maybe since you're packing, I'll take the kids to the fair tomorrow. And they're like, what a great idea, let's do that. She's like, okay, I'll be back tomorrow at 9 a.m. So Laurie goes back to her house and starts preparing for May 20th. She makes more tainted food. She mixes arsenic and water and draws it up in a syringe. And she uses the syringe to put this arsenic liquid into juice boxes. On the morning of May 20th, Laurie gets up early and leaves the house. She makes several stops. She delivers poisoned snacks and juice boxes to homes in Winnetka, Highland Park, and Glencoe. Fortunately, her attempts are amateurish, but she also stopped at the post office where she mailed packages to Rusty Dann and her former psychiatrist. When she arrives to pick up the boys for their trip to the fair, Laurie serves them milk that she had tainted with arsenic. The boys only take a little bit of the milk and they're like, ugh, and pour it out, thankfully, so they don't get sick. The boys' mother is going to be home that day doing chores and preparing for the move while the boys go with Laurie. Now, this mother does not realize how sick Laurie is. Laurie is still presenting, they knew she was a little weird, so she doesn't seem too bad.
And when she did show up, she did look different.
Yes.
She said her hair wasn't nice and everything, but she didn't think nothing different because she always took care of their kids good and she was a good caretaker.
Right.
So she didn't think nothing of it.
Well, instead of taking the boys to the fair, she drove to Ravinia Elementary School in Highland Park. Now, Laurie was obsessed with Rusty's sister, Susie, and guess whose children attend Ravinia Elementary? Susie's kids. When Laurie arrives, she opens an exterior door to the building and throws in a homemade incendiary device. Laurie had put gasoline in a plastic bag, set it on fire, and threw it in the building. Fortunately, it was a dud. There was a small fire which was quickly extinguished, and no one was injured. Now, I've heard, and I don't know if this is true, but I have heard a rumor that there is a burn spot on the floor where this hit, and that it was there for years. So imagine there's a fake firebomb at your school and they just leave the tile there.
You see, in the book, there's a book about this whole case called Murder of Innocence. And in that book, it says that she actually went in the building and put a little house that they had set up, and she had put it in the house.
Oh.
And some of the kids were coming out, they're going for recess or something, and the teacher didn't notice it. It was one of the students that said, there's a fire in here, and that's when they put it out. But you're right, it did stay there for years.
Yeah.
But yeah, when the students found out, so the teacher just walked by it and you need to do something about this.
So Laurie's next stop is 9:30 in the morning. She's at the Young Men's Jewish Council in Highland Park. She tries to enter the building with a gas can, and a custodian stops her, and Laurie runs away back to the two boys waiting in her car. Now again, this is where her former sister-in-law sent her children for preschool. So you can see Laurie's just got this bizarre fixation. She's been thwarted. She takes the boys back home, and the mom's like, wow, you guys are back early. Mom had been down in the basement doing laundry when the boys came running downstairs. So mom goes to the stairs to go up to ask Laurie what's going on, except the stairs are on fire. Laurie set their house on fire, trapping the mother and sons in the basement. They were fortunately able to escape the house through a basement window. It is now 10:30 a.m. After leaving this house in flames, Laurie drives to Hubbard Woods Elementary School. It's likely that she heard the sirens from fire trucks racing to put out the fire she started as she entered the school. Once inside, Laurie is carrying a plastic bag that contains 3 handguns. These are the guns that her father said would be locked up. Inside the school, Laurie encounters 6-year-old Robert Trossman, and she shoots him. Then she drops the gun on the floor and heads down the hall. Robert will survive. He will be okay. Everyone heard the gunshot in the building, but they all thought it was something else. It didn't register with anyone that there was a gunshot. Laurie finds an open door, walks into a classroom where she sits down near the substitute teacher who is in the middle of a lesson. The teacher's name is Amy Moses, and Ms. Moses does not understand why this woman is in her room, but she's like, well, maybe it's a parent or another staff member.
And plus with the bike, because they're doing the bike testing today,
Yes.
they thought might have been an outside teacher to monitor and see how the class goes, because they already took the writing test, and now they're doing a written test.
Yes.
If they could ride their bike home and back to school and stuff like that. So she just thought, and she gave her paperwork and everything. Here's the notes.
So Laurie watches the classroom for a minute and then pulls out a gun and orders the children to move to one side of the room. That's when she starts shooting. And the teacher intervenes, trying to get the gun, trying to stop the shooting. Laurie Dann will murder 8-year-old Nicholas Corwin and wound 5 other students before running from the building. Laurie is in a panic as she drives away. She guides her car at high speed down a dead-end street. Realizing too late that the road is ending, she loses control of the vehicle and crashes into a tree.
Also during that time, there was a funeral going on. The fire chief had just died, so they had a big, huge funeral procession. The police had all the roads blocked off, so she couldn't go that way, so that's when she went that way. And a lot of people said that when the shooting happened, that Nicholas actually pushed some of the other students out of the way to kind of protect them. So that's a lot of people, Nicholas. I do apologize. So Laurie Hobbs steps out of the damaged car, strips off her blood-soaked shorts, which that's
We're not
always
sure why she was bloody, but she was bloody.
Yeah, and then she put a plastic bag. I don't know where the blood came from, if she was injured or the blood came from one of the children that was shot. She wraps a plastic rag around her waist and runs up to a nearby house where she enters through the back door. Inside she finds Ruth Andrew and her son, 20-year-old Philip, which, that's always puzzled me about the bag. I never knew why she had a bag wrapped around her. Ruth and Philip looked at wild-eyed, half-naked Laurie as she tells them that she had been raped and shot her attacker and she was afraid. But the police didn't believe that's what happened. The Andrews wanted to help despite this loving woman. It helped her. Ruth comforts Laurie and gets her a pair of pants to wear. The Andrews quickly realize that Laurie is deeply disturbed as the air fills with sirens. It dawns on them that the police response unfolding at the school nearby their home because of the woman in their home. So they think maybe she has something to do with it. Philip's father returned home from work early, disturbed by the news reports about what was happening in the neighborhood. He walked to find Laurie Dann holding his wife Elsa at gunpoint. The family is trapped with Laurie Dann for hours. During the time, Laurie called home, and her mother begged her to turn herself in, to not hurt anyone else. Philip Andrews spoke to Edith Wasserman, telling her that she should come pick up Laurie, that she said she couldn't come. She needed to come and help her, but she said she couldn't.
This makes me so angry that if your child calls you and says, I need you, she's obviously in crisis, and you're like, well, I don't drive.
Yeah, she said I couldn't. And even back to the wedding, Russell actually called the parents because they did a lot of vacations in Florida. And they're like, your daughter needs you. You need to come cut your vacation and come. And they're like, oh, I don't know, why don't you wait a few more days? We'll be up there. And there's my daughter. There's no way I would leave her. But yeah, Edith refused, saying that she didn't drive. She couldn't make it there. When I read this, I just, like you said, you just lose it. There are 100 different ways she could have gotten to Laurie. She could have put a stop to the carnage right then and there. Instead, Edith did nothing to help her youngest child. She did nothing to help Andrew's family. Edith Wasserman did nothing. And through her whole life, she did nothing. Eventually, Laurie's father arrives at the scene and tries calling Laurie, talking to her through the bullhorn. Even Rusty Dan shows up, but they kept him to the side. He didn't want to, they're afraid that he might start something with her. Hoping that he can persuade his former wife to do things that, stop the carnage. But yeah, too late. Now he wants to help. When Laurie is distracted, Philip gestures to his mom to leave the house, to make her run for it. And he struggles with Laurie to control the weapon. During the struggle, the gun goes off and shoots Philip in the chest at close range. He will survive. The bullet punctures both lungs. esophagus, I'm sorry,
Yeah,
esophagus.
esophagus.
I'm not the best reader, I'm sorry, as you can see. Stomach and pancreas. He staggers out of the house into the lawn, seriously wounded. His parents, who made it out of the house, raced to his side, carried him to safety. After shooting Philip, Laurie Dann ran upstairs and turned the gun on herself. The standoff and the strange life of Laurie Wasserman came to an end. After the shooting, police went to interview the Wassermans, but this is when they tried to cover it all up. Went to Wassermans, but the request was denied. Law enforcement attempted to search Laurie's bedroom, but only a quick search is allowed before they were asked to leave the house, get out of here. The Wassermans and their attorneys remind police that they were grieving the death of their daughter and they did not want to be bothered at the time. Despite needing time to grieve, the Wassermans managed to throw out or destroy almost everything that was in Laurie's bedroom. The Wasserman leaves little for the police to take, and when they are finally given access to the home. So again, like in college years and everything, they're just covering everything up. They get rid of everything, and like there's no phone. Following the horrific and terrifying events of May 20th, Chief Herbert Tim of the Winnetka Police is livid. He wants to know how someone like Laurie had access to multiple weapons. He's asking just one of the many questions the community is left with the wake of the tragedy.
And that's a question we ask all the time now, even 35 years later. Why did this person have access to guns? So you may think, this happened in 1988. It's a long time ago. We are still facing these same issues today.
But it has gotten a lot better since then because there's no background checks. Back then, all you would have to do, they give you a form if you want to buy a weapon, and you have just checks. Are you ever been to a mental institution? No. Have you been this? No, no. And they did no background check. So you walk in, fill that form out, and here's your weapon. I think there might have been a day load or a weight or something like that, I'm not for sure. But yeah, within weeks of the shooting, Wassermans left Illinois for good, relocating to Florida. Yeah, that's where they've been wanting to go the whole time. Being 1,300 miles away from Rocco Raton allows them to, I said that name wrong, Raton. Boca Raton. Allows them to decline multiple requests to return to Illinois and depositions, hearings, interviews, so they just dismiss everything like it didn't even happen. Laurie's parents never spoke to the press or the families, chosen to hide behind their lawyers and shield themselves from society. The only statements her parents offered was issued a few days after events on May 20th, quote, "Mrs. Wasserman and I reach out to all the families in their suffering. We suffer with them. Our prayer is that time will help alleviate the pain." In 1989, Joel and Linda Corwin, the parents of 8-year-old Nicholas Corwin, murdered by Laurie Dann in his classroom, sued the Wassermans for damages because it could have been prevented, claiming that the Wassermans' negligence and refusal to seek inpatient treatment for their daughter resulted in the death of their sons. The Wassermans obtained legal counsel attempting to avoid payouts, but they were unsuccessful. The Corwins eventually agreed to a settlement when the court made it clear that the Wassermans shared responsibility for the actions of their daughter on May 20th, 1988. Norm Wasserman died in 2006. Laurie's mother, Edith, passed away in 2010. 3 members of the Wasserman family, all three members are buried in Shalom Memorial Park in Arlington Heights, Illinois. Now, Laurie's is unmarked, and they will. We don't know where it's at.
You've been there.
I've been there, but it's so huge, and the office is closed, so I couldn't. But I do believe that because of everything that went on in their life, I believe that she's probably with them. Would you think so? But the people of Highland Park, Winnetka, you going to say something? Sorry. Yeah. Okay. Still remember May 20th. They didn't think about it often, but it's still there. Under the surface, children who lost their sense of safety at school, parents and families who sadly didn't recognize the community they called home. But yeah, there's Nicholas Corman. If you want to, he was born April 9th, 1980. He was murdered May 20th, 1988. Beloved son, brother, and friend, a brilliant light, our lasting love. He is buried in Memorial Park Cemetery in Skokie, Cook County, Illinois. His memorial ID is 858-5980. And his final grave says, murder victim, 8-year-old Nicholas was shot and killed at the Hubbard Woods Elementary School by Laurie Dann.
Does anybody have any questions about Laurie or her family or her very disturbing crime spree?
What's happened to Rusty? Does anybody know what's been going on with Rusty?
He remarried and I believe is just living a regular,
He tried to get out of the spotlight of it all.
yeah.
You know, once he got married with her, but once he found her, once he got rid of her, he just didn't want nothing to do with it no more.
Well, thank you for coming. I hope you enjoyed our rather disturbing presentation. Wait. Oh, yeah, there's a couple of things we're just going to go over very briefly.
Yeah, Corman's murder inside elementary school was among the first to feature prominently in the 24-hour news cycles, mostly revolving around Dan's mental state because no other school shooting had received such wide coverage. The murder is sometimes called the first school shooting, but all but one of the victims wounded by Dan recovered from the injuries, including a girl who was shot and suffered several internal injuries. So there's one victim. Mental issues is also. The victims and their parents received extensive support to help them cope with the effects of it. So they did step in. Dr. Donald Monroe, Superintendent Winnetka School District 36, noted his safe school was not as isolated or insulated as he thought. He thought his school was safe. At that point, they started really ramping up security features, make sure, like Laurie got into that one school with no problem, so they started making sure that all the doors are locked. So there's no way this could happen again. And of course, the weapons, they started more strict gun laws.
Well, and we didn't
ever be strict enough.
We didn't see real serious school security changes until after Sandy Hook, and that was almost 30 years later.
Mm-hmm.
You know, that's how my kids were in school, and we started locking the doors. You know, you had to be buzzed in.
I still get in my school, and I graduated until 95. My sister graduated 98. You can still walk in the school. Wow.
We can't even go. Our schools right here, we can't even go into school. We have the buzz, they have the cameras and everything like that. So you cannot go into these schools without getting in.
I grew up in Central Michigan. You could still, sometimes you can get in on the
Sure,
weekends.
yeah.
Still on the weekends, you can still get in.
It's good that you mentioned Sandy Hook because right there, I don't think gun control is the issue. I think it's mental health issue is the issue. So, I mean, like a car, I was thinking about this not too long ago. If you have a car that's, the computer chip's going out, you don't keep bandaging up, you can't fix it up, you fix the computer.
Right.
So as a person, if the brain's not working right, you just keep putting plastic surgery, fix the teeth, everything you pay out. No, you fix that, even if it means, submitting them forcefully into medicine, which I like to hear somebody's opinion about that. You think in cases like this, should we forcefully put people in medicine? Would that be like putting them in jail or?
We talked earlier about the involuntary commitment, and Laurie qualified for an involuntary commitment to a psychiatric facility, but nobody was willing to, dare I say, pull the trigger on that.
You think police should have filed themselves?
Police aren't in a position to file because they haven't witnessed the behavior. It would need to be her husband or her parents or her siblings, somebody who has witnessed the self-destructive,
Okay.
self-harming
I
behavior.
understand now.
So the police really can't do it.
She's here to voluntarily commit someone and force them to do it.
Yeah.
So I was able to help you get that.
Yeah, I was just gonna say, as far as I understand it, it may be different because you've worked in it a little bit more, but someone can be involuntarily committed, but they're not gonna be kept there forever.
No, it's a short term,
And once
yeah.
that person leaves, unless they wanna take their meds or not.
Right.
in a long
You can't
time,
force
they
them to be
don't.
compliant.
And that's what's so hard is that sometimes they don't help themselves either, and that's the scary thing with mental health. I think we have horrible mental health resources in general for people, especially if you don't have money. But it's also hard because people who have really severe mental health issues, it's hard to keep them compliant.
Yes.
And that's like the scariest part, is that even if you do try, it's how do you keep them compliant, and that's hard, and it's scary.
That's the thing about
Sad.
That's the thing about the Watchmen's. They did have the financial means to do this, but they just didn't want to. I don't know if they didn't want to spend their money or put the effort into it. I'm
Right,
sorry.
yeah.
Yeah,
Embarrassment of that.
Okay, we have to wrap up because I have another thing to go to.
Oh,
Sorry.
that's it.
Yes, but thank you so much.
Thank you for joining me.